beggar boy fixes an old machine, but when the owner sees what was hidden inside, Walter Harrison pushed the boy toward the door of his antique shop with a force that surprised even himself. The torrential rain pouring down on the streets of San Diego that winter afternoon made every drop that splashed inside the shop feel like a personal affront to the 60-year-old man. The boy, who had taken shelter there during the storm, didn't give up easily. Through the fogged glass, Walter could see the small, drenched figure trying to shield himself under the awning, his curly hair plastered to his forehead and his bare feet stepping into the icy puddles forming on the sidewalk. "Get out! This isn't a charity house," Walter shouted, banging his fist on the glass door. The boy didn't answer, only shrinking further against the wall, hugging his thin knees to his chest. He couldn't have been more than 10 years old, wearing clothes far too big for him, probably donated or found somewhere. Walter rolled his eyes and turned back into the depths of the shop, determined to ignore the unwelcome presence. Harrison Antiques had been the pride of his family for 3 generations. Now, with shelves covered in dust and only a few sporadic customers, it felt more like a warehouse of forgotten memories than a thriving business. Walter walked among the old furniture, the rusted sewing machines, and the trunks full of seemingly worthless objects, feeling the weight of years of loneliness. Then he heard a strange noise coming from the back of the shop. Walter turned quickly, his heart racing. There was the boy, completely soaked, fiddling with something covered by an old tarp in the darkest corner of the shop. His small hands worked with a precision that didn't match his apparent age. "How did you get in here?" Walter stormed toward the boy, his voice trembling with anger. "I locked the door." The boy looked up but didn't stop working on the object. Under the tarp, Walter immediately recognized the familiar shape. It was his father, Howard Harrison's old movie projector. The machine that had been broken for over 20 years, the one he had sworn never to touch again. "The back lock is broken, sir. Anyone could open it," the boy replied in a calm voice that contrasted with his vulnerable appearance. "But I didn't come to steal anything, I was just sheltering from the rain." "Take your hands off that projector right now," Walter shouted, rushing toward the boy. But when he got close, something made him stop. The boy had managed to remove one of the machine's internal parts with surgical care, as if he knew exactly what he was doing. His hands, though small and dirty, handled the makeshift tools with the skill of an experienced technician. "You don't understand," the boy said, looking straight into Walter's eyes. "This machine isn't really broken, it's just asleep." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. Walter felt a tightness in his chest. No one had touched that projector since the day his life had completely fallen apart. It was the last physical reminder of his father and everything he had lost. Seeing this strange boy tinkering with the machine was like watching someone desecrate a grave. "Stop right now!" Walter tried to grab the boy's hands, but he dodged with surprising agility. "Sir, please, let me finish. My grandfather taught me how to fix these old machines before I was left alone." The boy's voice trembled slightly. "He said they have a soul of their own and just need someone who understands their language." "Your grandfather?" Walter hesitated, curiosity momentarily overtaking his anger. "George Johnson. He spent his whole life fixing movie equipment. He used to say every projector had its own personality." The boy kept working as he spoke, his hands never stopping as they fiddled with the inner gears. "This here is a 1952 model, made by Cinetech. Grandpa had one just like it." Walter froze. George Johnson. He knew that name from somewhere but couldn't place it. His memory, like everything else in his life, seemed shrouded in a thick fog of bitterness and forgetfulness. "What's your name, boy?" "Tyler. Tyler Johnson," he answered without looking up from his work. "And where are your parents?" The boy paused for a moment, his hands hovering over a small gear. "I don't have any family left, sir. I've been on the streets for 3 months, ever since I was left alone in the world." The honesty in Tyler's voice stirred something in Walter's hardened chest. For a moment, he saw himself reflected in that boy. The same loneliness, the same helplessness, the same feeling of having lost everything that mattered. "Even so, you can't stay here messing with my things," Walter said, though some of the edge had left his voice. "Just a little longer, sir. I've almost figured out the problem." Tyler looked up at him with eyes that seemed too big for his thin face. "If you give me just an hour, I promise I can get it working again." Walter laughed bitterly. "An hour? Boy, this machine's been broken for over 20 years. The best technicians in San Diego have tried fixing it, but they didn't know the secret my grandpa taught me." Tyler smiled for the first time, revealing a gap between his front teeth. These old machines aren't just gears and motors. They hold memories. Something about the way the boy spoke of memories touched an old wound in Walter. He stepped closer, watching the small hands work with almost supernatural precision. What kind of memories? The ones trapped inside the mechanisms. Every film that runs through them leaves a mark, an energy. When they stop working, sometimes it's because they're overloaded with memories. Tyler removed another part, holding it up to the dim light from the window. "Grandpa said you had to talk to them first, understand what they were holding on to." A shiver ran down Walter's spine. Those words echoed something his own father, Howard, used to say about the projector. "This machine has a soul, Walter. It knows every story it's ever told." "All right," Walter said, surprising himself. "1 hour. But if you break anything, you'll have to pay for it." Tyler nodded eagerly and went back to work with renewed enthusiasm. Walter pulled up an old chair and sat to watch, strangely mesmerized by the boy's precise movements. As he worked, Tyler began murmuring softly, as if talking to the machine. Every now and then he'd pause to listen to something only he seemed to hear, then nod and continue. "What are you doing?" Walter asked. "Listening to it, sir. Every machine has a way of speaking to us. This one's telling me it's got something heavy on its heart." Tyler pointed to a compartment Walter had never noticed before. "There's something in here it can't process." "A compartment?" Walter leaned in for a better look. "I've never seen that before. It's hidden behind this panel. Grandpa taught me to look for these secret spaces. Sometimes projectionists kept important things in there." Tyler tried opening the small compartment, but it seemed locked. "There's a tiny latch here." Walter felt his blood run cold. His father had never mentioned any secret compartment in the projector. Could something have been hidden there all these years? "Let me see," said Walter, kneeling beside Tyler. There was indeed a small, nearly imperceptible latch on the side of the compartment. Walter tried to force it, but it was stuck from years of rust. "Be careful, sir. If you force it too much, it might break." Tyler picked up a small improvised tool and began working delicately on the latch. Grandpa always said haste is the enemy of perfection. After a few minutes of patient work, they heard a soft click. The compartment opened, revealing a small but deep space. Inside was something wrapped in a cloth yellowed with age. Walter hesitated before touching the object. His fingers trembled as he finally picked up the bundle and carefully unwrapped it. Inside were 3 16mm film reels and a sealed envelope with the name "For Walter" written in his father's unmistakable handwriting. "Your father left this for you," Tyler said softly, as if understanding the weight of the moment. Walter held the envelope with shaking hands. For 20 years he had searched for a letter, an explanation, any sign that his father had thought of him before leaving, and now, there it was, hidden in the machine he had rejected for so long. I can't... Walter began to hyperventilate. Tyler placed a small, warm hand on Walter's arm. "Sometimes the most important things are the hardest to face, sir. But my grandpa used to say courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about doing what needs to be done even when you are." Walter looked at the boy, who seemed to possess wisdom far beyond his 10 years. There was something about him that reminded Walter of his own father, the same kindness, the same ability to see beyond the surface of things. With trembling fingers, Walter opened the envelope. Inside was a 2-page letter in Howard Harrison's careful handwriting. "My dear son Walter, if you're reading this letter, it means you've finally found the courage to return to the projector. I know our last argument was painful and that you left home vowing never to touch this machine again. But I always knew you'd come back someday. I hid this letter here because I knew that when you were ready to forgive me, you'd also be ready to understand what this machine truly means to our family." Walter stopped reading, tears blurring his vision. Tyler continued working quietly on the projector, giving him privacy to process his emotions. He knew I'd come back," Walter murmured. "Parents always know," Tyler said without looking up from his work. "Even when they're no longer with us." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. Walter kept reading the letter, each word cutting like a sharp blade through his heart, armored by years of bitterness. "This machine isn't just a projector, Walter. It's the keeper of all our family's memories. Inside these film reels are the most precious moments we shared. Your first steps, your birthdays, our last Easter together. I know you were hurt when I decided to sell the shop instead of leaving it to you. But son, you had talents far greater than mine. Your calling was always medicine, not business. I wanted you to soar higher than I ever could. The money from the sale is in an account at First National Bank on Main Street. I only used enough to support myself during my illness. The rest is yours, so you can finish your medical studies and become the doctor you always dreamed of being. Forgive a foolish father who didn't know how to express his love any other way. You were always my greatest pride, Walter, and wherever I am now, I'll still be cheering for your happiness. With all my love, Howard Harrison P.S. If you meet a technician named George Johnson, tell him Howard never forgot the promise we made to each other. He'll understand." The letter slipped from Walter's hands. George Johnson, Tyler's grandfather. Suddenly everything made sense. How easily the boy had found the secret compartment, his knowledge of old projectors, the way he'd appeared on that very day. "Tyler," Walter said, his voice choked. "What promise did your grandfather make to someone named Howard?" The boy stopped working and turned to face him. "Grandpa always talked about a friend named Howard Harrison. They worked together when they were young and made a pact." Tyler sat on the floor, hugging his knees. "They promised that if anything happened to one of them, the other would take care of the family left behind. And he kept that promise? Grandpa searched for you for years, Mr. Harrison. He knew you were alone after your father passed, but he could never find you." Tyler wiped his dirty hands on his shirt. He blamed himself terribly for it, said he'd failed his friend. Walter felt as if the ground were disappearing beneath his feet, all those years of loneliness and bitterness, and there had been someone looking for him, someone who cared. "And you? How did you end up here?" "After Grandpa passed, I stayed with some neighbors, but they couldn't support me for long. When I left, the only thing I took was this." Tyler pulled a small golden key from his pocket. "Grandpa said one day I'd find a lock for it, and when I did, I'd know I was in the right place." Walter studied the key. It was identical to the ones his father had used for the old equipment in the shop. "May I see that?" Tyler handed it over, and Walter examined it carefully. Engraved on the side were the initials H.H., Howard Harrison. "This key opened the cabinet where my father kept his personal films," Walter said, hardly believing what he was discovering. "But I sold that cabinet years ago." "Maybe the key isn't for a cabinet, sir," Tyler said, pointing to the projector. "Maybe it's for something inside here." They inspected the machine more carefully and found a small lock in the film reel compartment. The key fit perfectly. Inside was one last film reel, labeled, "For my son Walter. Watch only when you're ready to begin again." "Do you think we can get this machine working to watch the film?" Walter asked. "We're almost there, sir. Just need to reconnect these last pieces." Tyler returned to work with renewed energy. As the boy finished the repairs, Walter examined the other two reels from the secret compartment. One was labeled Walter, age 5, the other Last Family Easter. An hour later, Tyler stepped back from the machine with a satisfied smile. "All set, Mr. Harrison. Care to do the honors?" Walter approached the projector and with trembling hands flipped the switch. The machine hummed to life, its gears turning in perfect sync. "It's working," Walter murmured, disbelief in his voice. "After 20 years, it's working." "I told you it was just sleeping," Tyler grinned. "Now we can watch the films your father left." Walter loaded the first reel, and the image flickered onto the opposite white wall. The first scene showed a small boy taking wobbly steps toward a man Walter instantly recognized as himself, only much younger. "Is that you as a child?" Tyler asked, fascinated. "Yes," Walter answered, his voice thick with emotion. "I didn't even know my father had filmed this." The scenes unfolded one after another. Birthdays, Christmases, Sundays at the beach. Everyday moments Walter had completely forgotten. There was so much love and pride in Howard's eyes as he filmed his son that it was impossible to miss. "Your father loved you very much," Tyler said softly. "I thought he didn't care about me. When he sold the shop, I assumed it was because I wasn't good enough to carry on the family business." Walter wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "Sometimes parents make hard decisions because they love too much, not too little," Tyler observed with striking maturity. The second film showed the last Easter they had spent together. Walter vaguely remembered that day. They had argued about future plans and he had stormed out of the house, swearing never to return. But in the film, he could clearly see the love and concern on his father's face. Howard had tried several times to start a conversation, had prepared all of Walter's favorite dishes, and had even bought a gift his son never even opened. "I was so unfair to him," Walter sighed. "You were young. Young people sometimes need to rebel to find their own path," Tyler said. "My grandpa explained that to me when I got angry with my parents." Finally, it was time to watch the last film. Walter loaded the reel into the machine with a mix of anxiety and anticipation. The screen showed Howard's familiar face, but much older and clearly ill. He was sitting in the same chair where Walter now watched the film. "My dear Walter." Howard's recorded voice echoed through the quiet shop. "If you're watching this film, it means you finally found the letters and the other films I hid for you. It also means you managed to fix our old projector, and that makes me very happy." Walter leaned forward, hanging on every word. "I know you must be angry with me for leaving without a proper goodbye. The truth is, I didn't have the courage to see the disappointment in your eyes when you found out about my illness. I've always been a coward when it comes to emotions, son." Tyler watched respectfully, understanding this was a sacred moment between father and son. "I want you to know that every decision I made was with your future in mind. I sold the shop because I knew you had talents far greater than mine. You were born to heal people, Walter, not to sell antiques." On screen, Howard paused to cough, revealing the frailty of his condition. "I left enough money for you to finish medical school. It's all in the bank account. The papers are in the safe behind the painting of St. Mary. The combination is your birth date." Walter instinctively glanced at the painting on the wall, which he had never moved in all these years. "But more important than the money are these memories I'm leaving you. I want you to remember us in happy times, not in the sadness of our parting." The film showed Howard standing and walking through the shop, tenderly touching the objects he had collected over a lifetime. "This shop will always be yours if you want to keep it, but if you choose to follow your dream of becoming a doctor, sell everything and be happy. The only thing I ask is that you take good care of our projector. It holds not just our memories, but those of many other families who passed through here." Howard sat back down and looked straight into the camera. "Forgive a foolish father who didn't say I love you as often as he should. You've always been my greatest pride, Walter, and I know that wherever life takes you, you'll make a difference in the world." The image began to tremble, and Howard's voice grew weaker. "I hope one day you find someone to call family again. Loneliness isn't good for anyone, son. And when that happens, show them these films. Tell them about our love, even if it was imperfect." The movie ended with Howard waving at the camera, a sad yet loving smile lighting up his aged face. The shop stayed silent for a long moment. Walter wept openly, all those years of anger and resentment dissolving like salt in water. Tyler stepped closer and placed a small hand on the older man's shoulder. "He was right, Mr. Harrison. You'll make a difference in the world. You already made a difference in my life. How so? You gave me a chance when you could have kicked me out. You let me fix the machine even though you thought I couldn't do it. And now I understand why Grandpa gave me this key. Tyler smiled through his own tears. He knew that one day I'd find his best friend's son. Walter looked at this brave boy who had entered his life like a gift from fate. Tyler, where have you been sleeping these past few weeks? Different places, sir. Sometimes under the pharmacy awning, sometimes on a park bench. Tyler shrugged as if it didn't matter. But I always managed. What if you stayed here? I have a back room I don't use. You could help me with the shop, and I could look after you. Tyler's eyes lit up. You'd really do that, even though I'm just a street kid? You're not just a street kid, Tyler. You're the grandson of my father's best friend. You're your family. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps those of us just starting out. Now, continuing. In the weeks that followed, Walter's life changed completely. Tyler didn't just bring new life to the old shop, he also helped Walter rediscover passions he'd buried long ago. The boy had an insatiable curiosity about medicine, asking questions that forced Walter to recall everything he'd studied before dropping out. During slow afternoons in the shop, Walter began teaching Tyler about anatomy, biology, and the basics of medicine. Why did you stop studying medicine? Tyler asked one day as they sorted through a pile of old medical books Walter had kept in a trunk. After my father passed, I felt lost. I thought I had nothing left to fight for. Walter flipped through one of his old anatomy books. And also, I didn't have the money to continue. But now you do, right, because of the bank account? Walter had indeed found the safe behind the painting, just as his father had said in the film. Inside was a substantial sum, enough not only to finish his studies, but to live comfortably for years. Yes, I do, but now I'm too old to go back to school. Grandpa always said you're never too old to start over, Tyler smiled. And you're not that old anyway. The idea of returning to medicine began to grow in Walter's mind, like a seed that had lain dormant for decades. He started studying again, first for fun, then with increasing seriousness. Tyler proved to be an exceptional assistant. Besides having an impressive photographic memory, the boy also had a natural gift for connecting with people. The few customers who still visited the shop always left satisfied after talking with him. That boy has a special gift, remarked Mrs. Henderson, a longtime customer. He really listens when people talk. It was true. Tyler had an almost magical ability to make people feel heard and understood. Walter noticed the boy had inherited not just his grandfather's technical skills, but also his human wisdom. One day, while organizing the shop's backroom funds, Tyler discovered a box full of old newspapers. Flipping through the yellowed pages, he found an article about the local theater where Howard and George had worked together. Look here, Mr. Walter. Tyler pointed to a black and white photo. This is my grandpa. In the picture, two young men smiled at the camera beside a projector identical to the one they had repaired. The caption read, Howard Harrison and George Johnson, projectionists at the Pacific Theater, responsible for bringing the magic of cinema to San Diego. They were more than friends, Walter murmured, studying the photo. They were like brothers. And now we're like grandfather and grandson, right? Tyler said with touching simplicity. Walter smiled, feeling a warmth in his chest he hadn't known in decades. Yes, my boy, we are. As the months passed, Walter began seriously considering returning to medical school. There was a college in San Diego that offered a special program for mature students, and he had both the money and the motivation. What about you if I go back to school? Walter asked one evening as they ate in the shop's small back kitchen. I'll go with you, of course, Tyler replied as if it were obvious. I can study too. I already know how to read and write, and you've been teaching me so much. Would you like to study medicine too? I'd love to. Tyler's eyes lit up. I want to help people, just like you do. The idea of studying together, of building a shared future, filled Walter with a hope he'd forgotten how to feel. But before they could make concrete plans, the past came knocking in an unexpected way. It was a Thursday afternoon when an elegant woman entered the shop. She was around 50, with neatly styled grey hair and expensive clothes. Tyler was polishing some silver pieces when she approached. "Excuse me, do you carry old cinema equipment?" "We have a few," Tyler replied politely. "Mr. Walter knows more about it." Walter emerged from the back and immediately sensed something familiar about the woman, though he couldn't place it. "Good afternoon. How can I help you?" "My name is Helen Parker. I'm looking for equipment that belonged to the Pacific Theater, which closed many years ago." She glanced around the shop with interest. "I heard you might have some items." The name of the theater made Walter and Tyler exchange meaningful looks. "Why are you specifically looking for these pieces?" Walter asked. "It's personal," Helen hesitated. "My husband was a projectionist at the Pacific Theater long ago. He passed recently and left some unfinished stories about his time there. I'm trying to gather objects that might help me understand that part of his life better." "What was your husband's name?" Tyler asked with interest. "Charles Parker. But he always mentioned two friends he worked with, Howard Harrison and George Johnson." Walter felt as if he'd been punched in the gut. Another piece of his father's life was falling into place. "Howard Harrison was my father," Walter said slowly. "And George Johnson was my grandfather," Tyler added. Helen's eyes widened in shock. "That's impossible. Charles searched for you both for years." "What do you mean?" "After the theater closed, the three of them lost touch. My husband always blamed himself for it." Helen sank heavily into a chair. "He said they'd made a promise to always look out for each other and that he'd failed his friends." "What kind of promise?" asked Walter. "They swore that if something happened to one of them, the other two would take care of the family left behind. Charles took that promise very seriously his whole life." Tyler and Walter exchanged glances again. The same promise George had made, the same one that had led Tyler here. "Did your husband try to find my father?" "For years. He knew Howard had fallen ill, but when he tried to look for him, he discovered you two had a falling out and that you had left home." Helen wiped a tear from the corner of her eye. "Charles felt responsible for not stepping in at the time." "And my grandfather? Did he know your husband?" "He did, dear. In fact, George and Charles met a few times over the years. George always talked about you, about how he was trying to find Howard's son." Helen smiled sadly. "They planned to search for you together, but then George fell ill and my grandfather passed before he could find me," Tyler finished softly, "and Charles was left alone carrying the weight of the unfulfilled promise." Helen nodded. "He never forgave himself for that." Walter felt overwhelmed by the discovery that there were people who cared about him during all those years of self-imposed isolation. "Where is your husband now?" he asked. "He passed last month." His heart gave out. Helen dried her eyes. "But before he left, he made me promise I'd keep looking for you. He even left an envelope for each of you." Helen pulled two yellowed envelopes from her bag. One had the name Walter Harrison and the other George's grandson. With trembling hands, Walter opened his letter. The handwriting was different from his father's, but just as careful. "My dear Walter, if you're reading this letter, it means Helen managed to find you. I don't know if you remember me. I'm Charles Parker, your father Howard's friend from the Pacific Theater. I want you to know I never forgot the promise we made, the Three Musketeers as we called ourselves. I searched for you for years, especially after I learned of Howard's passing. I know you two had a falling out, but I also know how much your father loved you. Howard always talked about your dream of becoming a doctor. I hope you've managed to fulfill that dream. If not, know it's never too late to start again. I've left you some mementos from our time working together, including photos and a small sum of money I set aside over the years, hoping for the day we'd meet again. Forgive me for not being able to keep our promise while I was alive, but perhaps life has its own plans, and you'll find each other through those we loved. With affection and admiration, Charles Parker." Tyler opened his own letter, which contained similar words of care and a small amount meant for his studies. "They never forgot their friendship," said Helen, "until the end." Charles spoke of you both as if you were family. But we are family, Tyler said gently. Maybe not by blood, but by heart. Walter looked at the wise young man who had changed his life, and at Helen, who had brought the last piece of a puzzle he hadn't even known he was trying to solve. Helen, do you have family? I have a daughter, but she lives in New York City. We've grown a bit distant since Charles passed. She sighed. The house feels too big and quiet for one person. What if you weren't alone? Walter suggested. Tyler and I are planning a big change in our lives. I'm going back to study medicine, and he's starting formal schooling too. We could be a chosen family. Helen looked at them in surprise. You'd have me. Our parents' friends are our friends too, Tyler said with his usual wisdom, and family isn't just who you're born with. It's about choosing to stay together. In the months that followed, a strange but comfortable routine settled among the three of them. Helen moved into the apartment above the shop, Walter enrolled in the medical program for mature students, and Tyler began attending a nearby school. The shop kept running, but now with a different purpose. Instead of just selling antiques, they started restoring old objects, especially cinema equipment. The combination of Tyler's technical skills, Walter's knowledge, and Helen's connections created a thriving business. But the real transformation happened in their family dynamic. Helen turned out to be an exceptional cook and took on the task of making sure Walter and Tyler ate properly. Walter began helping Tyler with his studies and guiding Helen in practical business matters. Tyler, with his youthful energy and unique perspective, kept both adults connected to the present and hopeful about the future. Funny how life works, Helen remarked one evening as the three of them ate dinner together. Charles spent his whole life looking for you, and in the end, it was his absence that brought us together. Grandpa always said destiny has its own paths, Tyler observed. Sometimes what seems like an ending is just the beginning of a new story. And what a story, Walter laughed. A bitter old man, a street kid, and a lonely widow. Sounds like the start of a joke. Or the start of a family, Helen corrected warmly. The biggest transformation, however, was yet to come. One day, while Walter was at college and Helen had gone out shopping, Tyler was alone in the shop when a well-dressed middle-aged man walked in. Good afternoon. I'm looking for Walter Harrison. He's at college, sir. Can I help you with something? My name is Dr. Robert Williams. I'm the medical director at Mercy Hospital. I heard Mr. Harrison has gone back to studying medicine after many years. Tyler nodded, curious about what this important man wanted with Walter. The medical community in San Diego is small, and word has reached me that he has an interesting story. I also heard he has a young assistant with impressive knowledge about old medical equipment. You mean me? Exactly. One of my colleagues visited this shop and was amazed by your understanding of how old machines work. He said you explained the workings of an old X-ray machine better than many trained technicians. Tyler blushed slightly. My grandfather taught me that all machines share the same basic principles, and Mr. Harrison explains a lot about medicine to me. That's exactly why I'm here. Dr. Robert leaned forward with interest. The hospital is planning to create a museum of antique medical equipment. We want to showcase the evolution of medicine over the years. We need someone who understands both the technical and historical aspects. And you thought of Mr. Harrison? I thought of both of you, actually. Walter as a medical consultant and historian, and you as an expert in restoration and equipment operation. It would be part-time work, allowing him to continue his studies and you to stay in school. Tyler's heart raced. This could be the opportunity Walter needed to reconnect with his true calling. I'll talk to him, Doctor. I'm sure he'll be interested. When Walter returned from college that afternoon and Tyler told him about Dr. Robert's visit, he hesitated at first. I don't know, Tyler. I'm still getting used to being back in school. Maybe it's too soon to take on extra responsibilities. But Mr. Harrison, this could be the exact bridge you need between the past and the future, Tyler argued. You can use everything you've learned about antiques to help preserve the history of medicine. Helen, who had arrived in the middle of the conversation, agreed with Tyler. Besides, it would be a way to honor your father's memory. He preserved his memories in the projector, and now you can preserve the memories of medicine for future generations. The analogy deeply moved Walter. There was a poetic justice in the idea of using his antique skills to serve medicine. "All right," he said finally, "let's talk to Dr. Robert." The meeting at the hospital was a success. Dr. Robert was impressed not only by Walter and Tyler's knowledge, but also by the unique dynamic between them. He offered not just the museum job, but also a full scholarship for Tyler, provided he kept his grades high. "It's rare to see such a natural partnership between different generations," the doctor remarked. "You complement each other in remarkable ways." The museum project became a passion for both. Walter discovered he had a natural talent for explaining complex medical concepts simply, while Tyler proved to be a master at making old equipment work again. They restored everything from the earliest stethoscopes to 1920s X-ray machines. Each piece told a story, and they became the guardians of those narratives. "It's like your father's projector," Tyler observed one day as they worked on an old anesthesia machine. All these machines saved lives, just like the projector saved memories. The remark made Walter pause and reflect on the parallel. His father had preserved family memories. Now he was preserving the memory of medical progress. It was as if he were continuing his father's work on a different scale. The museum's success brought recognition not just locally but statewide. Newspapers wrote about the unlikely partnership between the mature medical student and his young prodigy assistant. Universities began inviting them to lecture on medical heritage preservation. "I never imagined our story would get so much attention," Walter remarked after a particularly successful lecture at New York University. "People love stories about second chances," reflected Helen, who had accompanied him on the trip. "And about families that form by choice, not by chance. And about boys who fix more than machines," Walter added, looking affectionately at Tyler. "They fix lives too." Tyler, now 12 and far more mature than his age suggested, smiled with the humility that had marked him from day one. "I just did what Grandpa taught me. Listen to what the machines were trying to say. In the projector's case, it was saying it missed working for people who loved each other." 2 years after that rainy day when Tyler had appeared in the shop, life had completely transformed for everyone involved. Walter was in his 3rd year of medical school with exceptional grades. Tyler was at the top of his class and already showed a specific interest in bioengineering. Helen had found purpose caring for her chosen family and helping others through a widow's support group she had founded. But the biggest change was yet to come. It was Christmas Eve when Walter called Tyler and Helen for a serious talk in the shop. "I have something important to discuss with you," he said, sitting in the same chair where he had watched his father's films 2 years earlier. "What is it, Mr. Harrison?" Tyler asked, noticing the seriousness in his tone. "Well, Helen and I have talked a lot, and we've decided—" Walter hesitated, clearly nervous. "We've decided we want to make our family official." Tyler's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" "Helen and I want to get married. And I want to legally adopt you, Tyler. I want you to officially be my son." The silence that followed was heavy with emotion. Tyler looked from Walter to Helen and back to Walter, processing the information. You're sure about this?" he asked in a small voice. "Absolutely," Helen replied, stepping closer and placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. "You've been our son in our hearts for a long time. Now we just want it to be on paper too." "And my last name? Will it be Harrison?" "If you want," said Walter. "Or we can keep Johnson too, Tyler Johnson Harrison. That way you honor both your grandfather and our new family." Tears began to roll down Tyler's face. "Grandpa would be so happy," he murmured. "He always said family isn't just about blood. It's about who chooses to stand by you." "And we choose to stand by you forever," Walter said, hugging the boy who had saved his life by fixing much more than just an old machine. The wedding took place the following spring, in a simple ceremony at the neighborhood church. The adoption was finalized soon after, with Tyler officially becoming Tyler Johnson Harrison, son of Walter Harrison and stepson of Helen Parker Harrison. Dr. Robert served as the best man, and several colleagues from the university and the hospital attended, along with neighbors and friends who had witnessed the family's transformation over the years. "It's funny," remarked Mrs. Henderson, the elderly shop customer during the reception. "I knew Walter when he was a bitter, lonely man. Now I look at him and see someone fulfilled, surrounded by love." "Love has that power," Helen replied. "It can transform anything." Tyler, looking sharp in his first suit, moved among the guests with the same natural ease he'd always shown in making human connections. Several doctors present were impressed by his knowledge and maturity. "That boy has a bright future ahead," Dr. Robert told Walter. "With his natural talent and your guidance, I wouldn't be surprised if he becomes one of the best doctors of his generation." "He can be whatever he wants," Walter replied with paternal pride. "I just want him to be happy." During the celebration, Tyler made sure to show guests the restored projector, which now held a place of honor in the shop. It had become not just a symbol of reconciliation between Walter and his father's memory, but also a testament to the transformative power of love and second chances. "This machine was broken for 20 years, Tyler explained to a group of curious onlookers. "But it wasn't really broken. It was just waiting for the right person to take care of it." "Like all of us," Helen murmured, watching the family that had formed around that seemingly simple machine. 5 years had passed since that first encounter in the storm. Walter had graduated from medical school with honors and secured a residency in pediatrics at Mercy Hospital. Tyler, now 15, was in high school and already planning a career in bioengineering with a focus on medical equipment. The Museum of Antique Medical Devices had become a national reference, attracting visitors from across the country. The antique shop still operated, but now with a special focus on items related to medical history. Helen had become a respected figure in the community, not just as the wife of a promising doctor, but as a counselor and support for others who had lost loved ones. Her support group for widows had grown into a recognized organization, but perhaps the most meaningful transformation was the home itself. The apartment above the shop, which had once been a lonely and silent space, was now a home full of life. Lively conversations during dinner, shared study sessions, and movie nights using the restored projector. "Sometimes I wonder what my life would have been like if I hadn't decided to take shelter here that rainy day," Tyler said during one of those movie nights, as they watched a classic film Walter had bought for the collection. "You would have found another way to help someone," Walter replied. "It's in your nature. You see possibilities where others see problems." "And I wonder what my life would have been like if I hadn't let you fix that machine," Helen added. "Maybe I'd still be alone in a quiet house, mourning someone who wanted me to be happy." "Grandpa always said that when one door closes, another opens," Tyler reflected. "But sometimes we need the courage to walk through the new one, or someone to push us through it," Walter laughed. On the screen, the film showed a family gathered around a dinner table, laughing and talking. The image mirrored exactly what they had built. Not a perfect family, but a real one, formed by choice, love, and mutual dedication. "You know what I've learned?" Tyler said, now almost as tall as Walter. "Broken machines can be fixed, hurt hearts can heal, and families can be made in ways we never imagined." "And wise boys can teach adults what really matters in life," Walter added, looking at the young man who had changed everything with infinite gratitude. "Love doesn't come with an instruction manual," Helen concluded, "but when it's real, it always finds a way to work." Outside, the rain began to fall again, just like that first night, but this time no one needed shelter. Harrison Antiques had become a true home, a place where old stories found new life and where the future was built on the solid foundation of genuine love. The projector in the corner of the room hummed softly, its well-lubricated gears working in perfect harmony, just like the family it had helped create. Different pieces fitting together perfectly, each one essential to the whole. And somewhere Howard Harrison, George Johnson, and Charles Parker smiled, knowing the promise made decades ago had finally been fulfilled. Not in the way they'd imagined, but in a way even more beautiful and lasting. The end. Now tell me what you thought of this heartwarming story of resilience and family. Do you believe destiny can really lead us to the right people at the right time? Leave your honest thoughts in the comments. I love reading every one of your messages. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other amazing stories. Thank you so much for your wonderful company.